Hello, everyone. Welcome to Design Together, a podcast exploring how designers work together. I am your host, Abby Ryan Guido, a designer and educator working in Philadelphia, collaborating everywhere. On today's show, we'll be talking with the brutally honest consultant, author, and speaker, Emily Cohen. Emily, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Abby. I'm so excited.
So I feel really lucky to call Emily both a colleague and a friend. I met Emily when she joined the faculty at Tyler School of Art and Architecture, where she teaches a section of our Business of Design course. And in the spirit of collaboration, I should also share that Emily and I have collaborated by co-teaching a course together last spring. And while we've only known each other for a few years, I have learned so much from Emily that I know everyone listening will today as well. Emily, I wanted to jump right in it and let you give a quick little intro of yourself and why you're here today.
Okay, I can do that. Actually, we met, I think, before I started becoming a faculty member, when I was the guest speaker to your students. But anyway.
Okay. See, Emily's always honest. She'll correct me, and I love it.
Okay, so I have been a consultant for 5 years, 30, really long time. And I started my career as a designer. Went to design school, got a, GDA, BA in graphic design, BFA. Was a designer for a few years in different environments. Like I worked in-house, I worked in a corporation, and I worked in a design studio. And my last experience at the design studio, I realized really, really quickly that I sucked at it. And I was never going to be really great.
Whenever you say that, I just have to say this. Whenever you say that, I don't believe it. I don't believe it, but go on.
Obviously you've heard that story too. So I say suck at it a lot. I just wasn't good. I'm super ambitious, right? I want to be the best at what I do. And I just knew that there were people better than me. And I didn't have that passion or that desire to really be anything great. And so I realized there were other people better than me. And I was like, what am I going to do? Who am I going to be when I grow up? And I was really involved in the design community then, and I am now. And I just asked everybody I knew, clients, friends, colleagues, mentors. I had a lot of mentors when I was first, right out of college. And I was like, what should I do? And everybody's like, you're really good at kicking people's ass. And back then, when I first started my career, there really wasn't project managers in design studios. There were account managers in agencies, but there weren't project manager roles. Now there's a million, which is fantastic. But back then there wasn't. So I just went to a bunch of design studios in New York and said, hey, I have design skills, but really I'm looking to kind of manage your studio. I'm really great with people. I'm really great with clients. I'm really good at pushing back. Is there a role for me? And I got literally 7 job offers in a week.
So there was a need.
There was a need. And it wasn't because I was great, although I think I am great. It was more because there was just nobody did that. And because I knew design, they were like, hell yeah. But so I took and the salary ranges were, of course, all over the board. Most people thought it was an entry-level position. I took the highest paid position. That was the only reason I took this job. And I ended up staying there 7 years and managing the studio. And as I was managing the studio, that grew from 5 to 45 when I left, the word spread among the design community because we all know each other across the country. It's very incestuous. We all sort of know each other. The word spread that, hey, there's this woman who knows design who can help you grow your business and evolve it. And so I started building consulting practice almost from day one, really, honestly. And then I met my husband, who then convinced me to quit my job and be a consultant full time. And he got me a fax machine. That was his hint. Yeah, here's a fax machine. Now you can run your own business.
That's all you needed.
Yeah, back then. Now I don't even know what a fax machine is. But back then, that's all I needed, right? So I started my own business, and I've been doing it for 35 years. And the word spread really quickly because we all know each other.
Awesome.
So I love what I do. So basically, I help firms evolve their creative businesses.
So I'm really excited to talk to you because you have the experience of seeing so many different studios, different sizes, different expertise. And so I wanted to jump right in, and being that this is about collaboration, I wanted to hear a little bit about what are some of the pitfalls you often see when it comes to advising a studio on building an atmosphere for good collaboration.
So there's a lot of different kinds of collaboration, right? There's internal and external.
So I'm open to hear about whichever. Is there somewhere you see more issues where you tend to spend more time?
I think internal collaboration is difficult sometimes, depending on the mix of behaviors and personalities and just how people like to work. So everybody works differently. And so that collaboration can be more around miscommunication than it is, or misunderstanding of each other's style. So I think I'm always mediating challenges between principals and their staff, or between staff, about what collaboration means and what that looks like. For example, I hear this a lot from people. Like, well, they didn't take notes in the meeting. I'm like, but I'm not a note taker and I'm really smart. Like, I don't go to a meeting and take notes. That's just not
Yeah,
my
I'm
style.
with you. I keep
Yeah.
trying to, and then I'm like, was that worth it? Like, did I
Yeah,
actually? I feel more engaged if I'm listening than if
exactly.
I'm
And
writing.
exactly. And we have all different learning styles. And so I think, and this, I actually have just started getting certified in a tool called DISC, which does behavioral assessments, because I realized that's an issue. Like, we just don't understand how we each need to work and how we each need to be communicated with in order to collaborate better. So I do think, I mean, some collaboration is amazing, but I will say to you, I absolutely hate the word collaborative cultures. So a lot of creative firms, a lot of corporations, they say we're a collaborative culture.
Hmm.
And what that essentially means is that there's nobody making decisions. So I don't like collaborative cultures. I like collaboration. I think collaboration cultures are
It seems more like a
really
buzzword
unhealthy.
of
Yeah,
when
yeah,
you say unhealthy, though, like when someone truly has what they consider a collaborative culture, what is that? Is that there is no hierarchy of decision making?
yeah. And I get that we want to have everybody's feedback and that we want to respect everybody's feedback. I get that. I'm completely with you on that. But what I don't like is that eventually, in order to make a decision and to move forward and to save money, sometimes it's around money. Like, so you have to make a decision at some point. And sometimes people just don't want to own that decision. They don't want the responsibility of owning that decision. Or there's nobody, and creatives are like this, they're sort of can see all sides and they don't like making decisions.
Do you,
It's challenging.
do you think that it is more likely a principal, a partner who says we have a collaborative culture because of their own fear of making that decision and maybe hurting someone's feelings that their opinions weren't considered?
Yes.
Or so it's
Yeah.
that, or
Oh,
is it the other way around of the employees feeling like they don't have a say?
I think it's kind of both. I think it depends on the culture. Every culture is different. And I don't even know. I don't, it's actually, I think that word collaborative culture comes more from in house teams than it
Mhm.
does in house, like within corporations, than it does from design studios. But design studios say it too.
When you say it, I think of the space. Like I think of
Yeah.
someone promoting, like we're a collaborative culture, like there's no walls and there's a ping pong table.
No, they
Um,
mean everybody's voice is heard. But
yeah.
then their voice, and then the problem is, so this gets to this whole other issue, which a lot of firms are doing right now. They're developing value statements or vision statements, and or a set of values. And one of them is always around collaboration. The other one's around transparency. Once you say those two words, you have to actually live those words. And those words really are great, but you have to live them. And if you don't, then you're going to create worse morale than you had before.
Yeah.
Right. So you
And
have to be careful about that kind of stuff.
sharing those two words, transparency and collaboration, there's a connection between them as well.
Yeah. It's about openness, sharing.
Right. So let's say you go into a new studio you're working with and they say they collaborative culture, but you're
Right.
witnessing that they're struggling to make decisions and to kind of move forward in projects.
Yeah.
What type of work do you do with them to help them work through that and to see the light and
Yeah.
try something else?
I don't consult on creative collaboration, but I do around business collaboration, decisions that we have to collaborate on.
Sure.
So I have different tools I use. For instance, one of the issues a lot of firms struggle with, well, there's a few, many issues actually, is people pleasing, right? They just want to be loved. They want they're afraid of pushing back with clients, but then they and they talk about how we collaborate with our clients, and but then that leads to kind of art direction by clients. So I talk to them about how to better manage clients, and that people pleasing doesn't mean you can't push back and still people liking you. Like, I always have this running joke, and if you've heard me speak, forgive me for, because I used this joke recently. I have to change my jokes eventually, but I always ask my audience when I'm speaking, like, how many of you have kids and dogs, right? Cats don't count. And, kids and dogs, they need management strategies. They need structure. They need, behavior, right, what's right and wrong. They need to be pushed back on. It doesn't mean they stop loving you,
Right.
right? And it's the same thing with clients. So that's one way. And then the other way is also just around how do we pick our clients, because the whole idea of, like, and this maybe is not around collaboration, so bear with me if I go off this topic, but I also talk about, like, not every client is worth us working with.
Sure.
And how do you, and giving them very strategic, criteria based, objective strategies for evaluating new business opportunities, see if they really work with the culture that they have and the kind of work they do, and if it leverages their team.
How do you feel about using that word, collaboration with clients? Do you advise against it? Do you think that a designer is not collaborating with their client, but they're serving them or working for them? What is the language you like to use?
I think they're strategic partners. They're partners in crime. They're not. I don't think they're collaborators. I think they're more partners. They're working together with a very so at a leadership level to come and solve a problem. So I think that's kind of the strategy. I would say. I think a lot of times with internal collaboration, I also work with them on process. When do they collaborate? I think that's the other thing is that there's no defined process internally within a culture, within a company, within a design first studio, necessarily to know when they're supposed to collaborate and when they're not supposed to, especially if there are multiple decision makers within the creative team. Like if you have several partners or you have a partner and creative directors, and there's a lot of voices in the team's head and they're hearing all these voices, but they're not sure whose voice matters the most. And when do you collaborate and when you don't collaborate? So I develop a lot of process thinking and mapping around when do you collaborate and when do you just have to make a decision and move forward.
Do you look at each individual client separately for that? Like, is there a process you set up that whenever you onboard a new client, this is what you do? Or is it specific
Yeah.
for that type of project that's coming in?
I think every time I work with my clients, it's different because it really has a lot to do with who they are as human beings. Everybody works differently, and I don't want to negate what they already do well. So I like to take what they already do well and just leverage. And also, we all have different clients, so everybody has different. Like collaborating with a or partnering with a nonprofit is going to be completely different than partnering with a solopreneur or a principal of a firm or president of a company. Like it just has different
Mm-hmm.
needs. So I usually look at the workload they have and the types of clients they have, and also just their staff. And mostly it's led by the partners because the partners are the only people the partners of the creative firms are the people I can't fire. Like they own the firm. Not that I go in and fire everybody. I actually do the opposite. But I would love to fire the people that run the firms because those are the ones that are most screwed up.
Well, talking about staffing, I know that you also help advise on bringing on new designers and new creatives to a
Yes.
staff. So I wanted to hear a little bit about that because I know a big part of your approach and what you shared is about that I don't want to say culture, collaborative culture, but that the personalities inside
Yeah.
and how everyone fits.
Yeah.
So how do you look at that process and how do you advise on
In
that?
terms of hiring new people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially small studios because
Yeah.
I talk a lot about that. I used to say something that I'm not going to say anymore, and that's that you want to be the person someone wants to grab a beer with after work
Yeah.
because that was wrong. Like looking back, like you might not be that person, and
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah.
So I want to hear a little from you. Like, what do you look for, and how do you help them find the right fit?
Yeah. So it's a puzzle I'm still working on, to be really honest, especially in this day and age when there are other issues that we have to deal with, like mental health issues, that and personal life balance, like the millennials who I love now, and also the whatever the younger millennials, there's something else, whatever the other younger generation than millennials. They're much more about like work life balance, right? So there's a lot more struggles in looking for the right people. I believe in making quick decisions because the best candidates get grabbed up. I believe in going by your instinct and making sure you like the person. So I do believe, obviously, in the old fashioned way of looking at portfolios first before you meet the person. If you meet the person first and then see their portfolio or see their portfolio when you meet the person, you'll fall in love with the person before the work. So first fall in love with the work. Then you have to meet the person and go by your gut. I do behavioral assessments now because I'm finding that really helps to see who you're missing on your team. Because a lot of people hire based on a fire. Like we have this project and they have an urgency and they hire the wrong people. So I always tell people to slow down enough to really know that find the right candidate. If it takes months, use freelancers until then. Like don't make a decision unless you find the perfect candidate. And read those red flags. I think we don't necessarily read the red flags enough. And then I also I believe in asking the right interview questions. My favorite interview question. Can I just share
Okay,
this?
as I was going to say, yeah, I need to know what are the right
And
questions.
I stole this. So my son got interviewed and he was asked this question. And I was in the background, like going, oh my God, that's the greatest question ever. It's the weird question, but this is the question. There are two types of people in this world. Who are they and which one are you?
Wow.
And it really gets to the
Did he give the
matter.
right answer?
There's no right or wrong answer. It just tells your personality. Like if I ask my husband that, my husband, and I know he would say there are assholes and not assholes. That's just how he sees the world. I would say, the people that are organized and not organized, right?
I love that question.
Oh, that would be my daughter's answer. We all have different answers in how we see the world. And so I love that question because it really tells a lot about and you have to make sure they answer it because people who, there are people who don't always answer directly or they answer what you think. So you have to make sure what they think you want rather than what they want to say. So make sure they're answering appropriate. Like you don't accept non-answers. I also believe in the old-fashioned like check references, but I don't like speak to their bosses. I like to speak to a client, somebody they managed, and somebody that worked with them, collaborated with them in some way. So like a programmer, a printer.
Yeah, right. They don't have the same, I mean, like the reference is always, I get asked, and I'm sure you have sometimes too, from students to write recommendations, and like
Yeah,
I always kind of laugh at them. I have a stockpile of them that I've written in, and I can pull pieces to make the process quicker because it is overwhelming. But I was like, what is the value? Because if someone asks me for a recommendation and I don't feel like I can give them a positive one, I recommend that they ask someone else.
yes.
Right. And so I'm not giving bad recommendations. And so it's hard to really use them. Like, how do you actually get them? And are you looking when you hear a recommendation for like the pauses? Like, how are
Yeah,
you
of
judging?
course. Yeah, and you have to ask the right questions. But I think it's because the bosses, first of all, a lot of times the bosses are not working directly with that person anyway. They might not have been.
Right.
So I don't even know how valuable that is. Um, and they're always going to say positive things because either they want them off their shoulders or they love them so much they just want to recommend to somebody else, right?
Right.
But I really like the true thing, like how are they as a human being? Like what was it like to work with them? Were they nice on the phone? How were their emails? Just like did they write well? Was the quality of their files, like asking printers and programmers, did they give you the necessary information to do your job? Those things are
Right.
kind of like nobody checks those references. And I think those are the ones that I think are very interesting. But it's all those things, right? You do behavioral tests, you check your references, you ask the right questions, you take your time.
Do you recommend that smaller studios bring someone in on a freelance basis first or full time?
Yeah.
Like, do you give that advice or do you let them make that decision?
I absolutely don't recommend
Okay.
that. The opposite. Because I think what happens is if you hire them, first of all, if you hire them as freelancers, the world is a little different now because it's COVID, but before COVID and after COVID, the best candidates are already snatched up.
Right.
And so you can't ask them to leave their job to freelance. And or the ones that are freelancing, they love that salary. When you freelance and you charge hourly, you can make a lot of money. And they think that translates to salary. So they'll do them if you pay them whatever, $50 an hour. If they do $50 an hour times the hours that they work full time, their salary is going to be like three times or twice as high as a normal salary
Sure.
because there's always salary discussions. And also the other thing when you freelance is that you don't see how they work with clients because you don't usually let them talk to clients or only select clients. You don't see how they manage others. So I don't believe in the kind of that model. I think that you just have to hire them. And if you don't like them, you'll let them go. Easier said than done. But I think it's about slowing down your hiring process on hiring the right people. But nowadays you can hire freelancers just because everybody's freelancing right now. So
Yeah.
I don't mind it now. Like, so I'm encouraging, if there is somebody that wants a full-time job, oh, here's the other thing about freelancers. If they're freelancers, they love that freedom. And so
Right.
and I just had this literally happen to me yesterday. So I was interviewing a candidate, third interview, we're ready to hire this person. She goes, well, I really want to work not really 40 hours a month. Like, can we do a week? Can we do it like flexible? And she's like, my client was like, sure, we'll do some flexible hours. We'll have like 2 days a week where you have to be available.
All day.
And the other 3 days you can work whenever you want as long as you work those hours. Like you could work nights, whatever, weekends. But 2 days I need to know that you're around for the studio collaboration, for client meetings. And we're like, that's a good compromise. Like, so there's that flexibility. But then the person pushed further to say, well, I want like 3.5, 4 days a week. I'm like, well, that's not the job we're offering you. It's 5 days a week. Right. And so freelancers love that flexibility. They don't want to give it up.
Yeah. Well, they also, I feel like there's, that fear that it's not going to turn into something full time. So you want to kind of keep your hands in something else and kind of be looking for the next freelance gig while you're working.
Yeah, exactly. And they're not committed. Right. So then they're going to leave you. So
Yeah.
I'm not a big, unless you want freelancers as a model, there are firms that have freelancing, lots of like a posse of freelancers as a business model. I was thinking of like super friendlies like
Right.
that, right? That's all they do. That's one person that has a lot of really good strategic, partners that work with him.
Partners, right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't believe in the freelance model, except for now I'm at this moment in time, right? Just because there's so many people freelancing.
Yeah. So I wanted to dive into the behavior test, which is not a personality test. Emily
No.
corrected me earlier. But if I think if it's called a personality test, I'm sure there's others
Oh,
that do
everybody
as
does.
well.
Yes.
So I guess I want to start first. Like, why is it a behavioral test and not a personality test? Just to clear the air on that one.
Yeah. So personality tests, I actually don't, those are more like the Myers-Briggs thing, which have been disproven actually. Behavioral test looks at the how we do things, how our behaviors, how we communicate, how we work with others. And it's a really good, it's just one tool to look at. Like this, we look at people's personalities, we look at their behavior. The other thing I also look at is their what they call motivational drivers. So there are things about the why that we don't see. So the how we see. Usually, if you don't
Right.
like somebody, that's a behavioral thing. You know right from the fact there's a behavior they're exhibiting that you don't like, right? But the why, what drives us, is internal and not usually external. So you don't know what drives people, and it's really helpful to know those two things. Like, are you driven by, the physical environment you're working in?
Right.
Right? Are you driven by, some people love chaos and can work in craziness, and other people really need structure. And so I like to look at those two things, those two areas,
Okay.
because I think that, and then personality, I don't do tests for that. I usually just like to see if I like the person.
Well,
And then,
how do you take yourself out of the equation though? Because you're not hiring them for yourself, you're hiring them for your clients.
right,
So how do you like because, I'm like sometimes I meet someone I'm like something just rubbed me the wrong
yeah,
way and I'm just not sure about this person, but the person I'm working for might feel totally different. So how do
exactly,
you balance that?
right. So when I look, first of all, when I identify a need for a studio, for like a hire, I want to look at what kind of fit do I need for the studio first. Like, what's missing in the studio? I always talk about this a lot. Like, do you have the cheerleader in your studio, the person that's always happy and just gets everybody's culture, everybody motivated and just is a happy, peppy person? Do you have like, the one that likes to learn a lot? Like, they just want to absorb and they want to teach everybody and they want to
Yeah,
learn the
I
like,
love that person you can always go to and ask like,
yeah,
what's the newest font out there? And they
right,
like
right,
are like, I'll send you
right.
20. Like, yeah,
And there's like the industry activist, somebody who's like telling you what's going on in the trends, what other studios are doing. They go to all the lectures, right? So you want to not only look at like, oh, I need a new designer, but I need a new designer, and that person has to also be a cheerleader, right? So that helps you first is to identify what you need. The other thing with behaviors is what the assessment tool does that I love is it tells you how you like to be communicated with and how you need to communicate with other people with different behaviors and how they like to be communicated. So, for instance, because I have a certain behavior that is, as you can tell, fast, everything has to, like, I get really impatient if you don't get right to the point. I want people to talk to me and tell me what their problem is so I can fix it. I don't want a whole story. I just want to know what the problem is, the right context. And the best way to communicate with me is to get to the point. Right? So if somebody doesn't understand how to work with me, they can see my behavior tool. They can say, "Oh, Emily, I
right.
need to do this a little bit. I need to
Because
modify."
for some people that might be, too abrupt and obnoxious, and they
Yeah.
might be like, "No, I want to know why. Like, don't rush. I
Yes.
want to hear the background." And yeah,
Right. And so if they're those people and I'm talking to them, then I need to then tell the story and slow down so that I can better communicate with them.
so
So
if someone uses this tool for hiring, do you use it first internally with the staff that's
yeah.
there?
hmm
Okay.
And also, it's best to hire people that are similar behavior. So you might want to say, I only like these kinds of behaviors. Like,
Which
I,
you might not know until you give the test, and then you see all your employees exhibit this one thing, and you're
exactly.
like, "Oh, I like
Yeah,
working with that type of person."
exactly. So that's easier to work with people that are similar in the way they communicate. Like, it's really funny. So I just got certified, or I'm just starting to get certified in this tool. And I collaborate with my daughter a lot, as you know, and we worked on a big project together. And we're very similar in a lot of ways, but we're very different in so many ways. She's one of those people that takes a million notes. And like, I am very intuitive. I'm like, I go and make recommendations based on intuition. She has to like make sure she studies everything. She goes online and does, and it was driving us like we were having major fights. Like, because it was just driving me crazy. I was driving her crazy. And we used the tool to figure out a better way of working. And it was great.
Wow.
And one of the things I said to her, and I am driven a little bit by being respected and a little bit around just being appreciated. Like I like to be appreciated. That's apparently my behavior. And so I said to my daughter, anytime you criticize me, can you at least tell me what I did right first? Like start nicely.
Right. Do the
And
sandwich first for
yeah,
Emily.
but be honest, like don't bullshit
Yeah.
me because I hate that. Um, and it was great. Like it changed how we talk to each other because we realized, okay, this is how she works, this is how I work. How do we work? How do we communicate with each other? That's a better way. And so now I'm trying to use that tool with my clients to help them understand who they hire and how they also manage the people they already have.
So, do you give it to a potential hire before they're hired? Is it part of the interviewing
Yes.
process?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
And
first
do you
I'd
share the
like to,
results with them?
yeah, if they want to, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's not by law, you can't hire somebody purely based on their behavioral assessment because there's too many it's looking at a person is multidimensional. It's just one of the aspects we look at. So I don't use it as the final test. I usually do it after the first interview with somebody that we're seriously considering and before the second interview.
Okay. Yeah. Once you finish your certification, I want to do mine again because I remember when we did it and I read it
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, this isn't me. But
Yeah.
then I'm like, did I overthink the questions and did I try to give the right answer?
Yeah.
Do they give advice on how to avoid that? Like
Yes.
I tend to
So
look for the right answer. I'm like, what do they want to know?
yeah. Well,
So,
first of all, the test we took was a free version of what I am now
right.
certified in. So that I realized in retrospect was a very terrible way of doing because it wasn't a robust tool. So the
Okay.
one we used was wrong. Um, the one I'm using now is much more robust. That's why I'm certified. That's why I had to pay money for it. The kind of it's really well developed, well thought out. So I will absolutely give you. I'm giving the test to my students now, and I'd love for you to take the test. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
And I'm still learning about. Look, it doesn't. With the way we do it, there's no right or wrong. I think that's the big thing. Also, is I usually tell people there's no right or wrong. Like there's no good or bad,
Right.
right? So you have to really make sure. And I thought that before I took the test. Like there's good. Like you should not work in a chaotic environment.
Right. But some folks have to.
Yeah, and I realized, wait, that's a behavior that actually gets people excited.
Yeah.
You know, so it made me realize be a little bit more open to understanding that people just work differently. And we just have to figure out what the environment, like if you're kind of like a crazy person where you have, not crazy, shouldn't say that, but like if you like working in a chaotic environment, you should hire people that other people like working in a chaotic environment,
Yeah.
because they're going to be driven crazy by your lack of
And on
structure,
the other side, you probably shouldn't hire someone who doesn't like that because that might be a really bad fit for them.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
like the note taking.
Yeah.
If you want somebody that's a note taker and a researcher and who loves knowledge, then hire that person.
Right. Which is hard when it comes to design because I think so many people focus on what's in that portfolio.
All they focus on.
Yeah. And
Or like that's the only thing they focus on, or just if they like them as a human being, which is of course very important.
yeah. So when we talk about like focusing on the portfolio, like do you give a percentage of like how much is about the work they're showing and how much is about everything else? Like if you're trying to
Yeah.
analytically figure out like who to hire, like is it
Yeah.
mostly the portfolio and just a little bit about personality? Is it 50-50?
I would say it's 50-50.
Okay.
I would say it's 50-50. Maybe it's like 40% portfolio, 40% the just liking them, and then the 20% other stuff, references, the behavioral test, kind of bunch of other stuff. I don't
Okay.
usually give percentages. I usually say, what are you feeling? Like, tell me your gut, because honestly, your gut means a lot. Like, even with clients, who's going to be a problem client. You just don't want to read those flags.
Yeah.
So I try to make my clients read those red flags.
It's I don't know if I've told the story to you before, but my first job in New York, I was like, we should hire an intern, and I'm 22, and so the partners were like, sure, go for it, hire an intern. So I put it. I don't even remember, it was 2001. How do you get the word out then? I don't know if there was a job board. I have no idea, but I know that I looked at the portfolio of a few people, and I was like, oh, that's the best one. I'll hire her. And she came in the first day, and she was a good designer and super excited, but talked from 9 a.m. until 6 p.m.
Yeah.
nonstop. And I'm a talker, but the culture there was not like that.
Yeah,
Like we talked at
exactly.
lunch, and I remember my boss John Claudio was like, Abby, did you interview her?
Did you interview her or no?
No. No one gave me any
Also,
guidance. They just said hire someone. So I said, all right, I'll hire
yeah.
someone.
Speaking of collaboration and portfolios, though, that's the other thing. You can look at portfolios, and it doesn't mean they did the work, right? So, what did they do in the work? So, even when you look at the work, looking for that honest, first of all, they should honestly tell you
Right.
what they developed and what they didn't develop, like student work. Like we talked about this when we were teaching, and I learned this a lot from you guys, is that, a lot of it's art directed by the teachers.
Right.
So they might see this amazing student work, and it might be they have potential, but the teachers made it shine. The teachers gave them, and it's the same thing with companies. You have to ask who else. First of all, they should. One of the tests is to see how they talk about who else they work with on the project and if they gave them credit. To me, that's a
Mm.
great when somebody said, I was art directed by this, or this was a collaboration between, so that they don't all feel ownership. Because a lot of times people put stuff in their portfolio they didn't have anything to do with, or they knew, they laid it out, but they didn't design any of it. So,
Right. I think on the flip
um,
side too, I'll just say this because I do help a lot of friends that are in the business hire students that just graduate. Is that we all have this memory of who we were when we got out of school, and somehow we were all these rock stars who knew everything.
oh yeah,
And so I see a lot of people hire someone, they're like, they're not fast enough, they're, whatever it is. And I'm like, you got to
they're
remember, like, they
students.
just got out of school.
I know. Oh, I know. Expectations are crazy. Like
Yeah.
people, I just saw this actually. One of my clients, I hope they don't listen to this podcast, but one of my clients just advertised for a role for a like a project coordinator role
Okay.
with 3 years experience. I'm like, a project coordinator is right out of school. Same thing. Like,
Yeah.
don't, they have unbelievable expectations. They want like with designers, they want them to do UX, UI. They want them to do branding and
Yeah.
marketing. And I'm like,
And know a little
there's differences.
HTML too in there. And
Yeah. And I'm like, no, there's no human being that's that good that can
yeah.
do all of those things and be a nice person. I mean, there might be. There's rare people that are like that. Um, but you have to figure out like what do you really need? What's the most essential, and what can you train them in, or what can you like? I have a client right now who's struggling with they do marketing and design, so they have a lot of like more advertising and design. So they have one person who's doing all the branding and the advertising, and they're really frustrated because the person is great at branding but terrible at advertising. I'm like, those are two different skills.
Yeah.
Hire a branding designer and hire an advertising designer. They're just two different ways of working,
So
you know?
from the other side, we talked a little about how employers sometimes might, expect too much or what they're doing to look for the right
Yeah.
person. What about the other side? What about someone who's looking for a company that has, the atmosphere where collaboration
Yeah.
is important? What do you look for if you're looking for a job and you're not able to say like, can I give all of everyone in your studio this behavioral test so I know if I fit in?
Yeah. Yeah. You can't do that. Wouldn't that be great? Oh my God. That's such a great idea. I think I might take that.
But like how do you? Because it is like, I also stress to students like you do have skills and you are going to provide something to a studio
Yeah.
and you are interviewing them in a way too. So what
Oh, absolutely.
what do you look for if you're on the other side?
I think it depends on what you need first. So, like, if you're a student, what you want is learning. That's the most thing. You don't need money. I mean, maybe you need money to pay off bills, but your debt. So I get that. But you should be driven only by paying off your debt. You really should be driven by learning because this is the critical moment in your life where you're gonna learn as much as you possibly can, right? So when you're a student, you might be looking for how am I going to be nurtured? How am I going to grow? How am I going to learn? Who's going to be my teacher? How does that look like? What does that look like? If I'm just here to input, type, and do layout with no creative role, then is that a learning opportunity?
Right.
So that's the first thing. But if you're more senior, you might want to look for definitely cultural fit, right? Do I like the people? So a big thing is have you interviewed everybody else that's on the team,
Hmm.
right?
And do you think it's okay to ask that? Like if you're only being interviewed by the partner, is it
Yeah,
okay to say before, make decisions, I'd love to meet the team?
yeah. But it's a red flag if they didn't offer that first,
Mm, right.
right? So if they didn't offer it, I would question, like, if that's important to you about who you work with and who you're managing, and they didn't offer that, that means they don't care about their staff's opinion,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that might be a red flag,
Yeah, totally.
right?
I'm thinking back to my career and yes, like one job I had that I didn't like I never met anyone until I came. And then when I came, everyone on the side at lunch was like, "What are you doing here? It's a horrible place
Yeah,
to be."
I know.
Yeah.
I know. So it's crazy, right? So you just have to decide what's important to you.
Hmm.
Funny is this other person I was telling you about that I did to interview for the third interview where they asked about like flexibility. The other thing they did is I gave them the opportunity to interview the other staff members.
Right.
And so we asked them, what would you like to ask the other staff members? She said, I don't have any questions. Like she's going to be the creative director of this team. She didn't ask like, how do you like to be managed?
Wow.
So I think for you want to find out who you're going to manage, who you're inheriting if you're going to manage people.
Right.
When you're interviewing, you want to meet the people that you're going to be managing to make sure they have a really good team, or that you like the people you're going to manage, or that you fit the kind of team that they need
Right.
and the kind of management style they need. So you might want to meet the people one-on-one, have coffee with them.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising to hear someone further in their career. Like, I think that often for younger designers, they're kind of scared if they say the wrong thing during an interview,
Yeah,
they're going to get cut out, which I'm always like, no, like telling them you want to meet the team is a positive. And if it's
yeah,
not
it's a
looked at as a
positive.
positive, then you don't want to work there. Like, that should be a
Yeah,
good thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're also afraid of like being, and you and I have no trouble with this. This is why we like each other so much. We're very much in your face and honest,
Right.
but in a way that's politically correct. Like we're not, and we still are caring.
Hmm.
You're more caring than I am, but we're still empathetic. You being more empathetic than me. Actually, that behavioral test has a really interesting thing about empathy.
I can't wait to take it because
And
you remember mine was like, I read it and I was like, this is not me at all.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it was really interesting. So there's like two ends of the, I don't know, scale of how you relate to people. And one of them was the empathetic people who really just want to help people just to help people.
Hmm.
And then there are people like me that are on the opposite end who want to help people, but they want something out of it.
Hmm.
They see progress. They want to see their recommendations listened to, or they want to see given praise. Like it was just interesting. And neither of those
See, I
are,
want the praise too. I like the praise.
yeah.
Like,
Like I want somebody to thank me. I really do.
yeah.
Or I
Yeah.
want to see that they're listening and they're, so I think that was an interesting, I don't know why I just went on this rampage about that. But I don't even, I
We were
forgot what we
talking
were talking
about how on the other side you find that if you're a good fit. And it's harder in this environment, right? People are being hired right now to work remotely with,
Yeah.
in some
Oh,
cases it'll
that's so
stay like that,
hard.
but in some cases you're going to go back. And,
Yeah.
I know, I have a whole, graduating class that graduated last year that has spent the year working remotely on these teams. And
Yeah.
do you have any advice for them when they do go back? Like,
Yeah.
what do you do? Like,
I'm actually working through that right now. It's hard. Like one of my clients asked me the other day, how do we onboard people virtually?
right.
I am, like it's hard. I think this world is changing, and I also have to learn. The way I learn is I learn through my clients' trials and errors,
Hmm.
and that's still something we're working through. I think what most people, my clients, are doing is requesting that they work 2 days on site
Okay.
at least, so that they start becoming more like there's collaboration, there's team building. If they want to have flexibility 3 days, they can work offsite. New people, what they're recommending is maybe to come a third day.
Okay.
So there's some training and onboarding, but there's always an opportunity when they're all together, all teams are together. So I have other clients that have been distributed teams from day before COVID.
Right.
So there are many firms that have been distributed forever. And so we're learning from those firms. And a lot of it is just better management of meetings, and Zoom, so that not people are overwhelmed. Like, so I'm working with a client that's distributed right now, and I recommended a 3-hour brainstorming meeting, and they're like, 3 hours? We have a rule, no more than 45 minutes on any Zoom call. I'm like, oh, that's a great rule. How do you manage that?
Yeah.
And they have an agenda. There's somebody who's responsible for making sure that meeting is kept on track. And if there's things that they need to table, they table that conversation. I thought that was fascinating. Like, okay, how do I change my idea of a 3-hour brainstorming to a 45-minute
Right.
series of 45 minutes?
And can it work that way?
Yeah, yeah. So I think we're going to learn those things as we go a little bit, and it's a little bit be trial and error.
Hmm.
I personally think the world's going to do both. It's going to be a combination of virtual and in person.
Yeah.
So a lot of my clients are hiring people out of state now. Right? This is one thing that's great about this moment in time. Your talent pool is now widened
Sure.
because you can hire from all over the
And-
country or all over the world.
Yeah, I talked to the partners from GE Loft, and we were talking about the other way around too. Like, clients are more open now to not hiring the designer that they Googled that happens to be within 5 miles of them.
Yeah.
Like, they're more open to working with someone remote because now they've gotten used to
Right.
doing that with their own employees. And so design firms are saying it's getting, it's easier to find those clients all over. So are you
Yeah.
finding that? Because
Well,
you're,
my clients never had trouble finding clients
yeah.
from all over. Like, I think it has a lot to do with your positioning. That
Mm,
to me was never an issue. So
interesting.
it's interesting. I mean, I think there's something around new business that if people are relying on referrals and your referral network's only local, that's what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's other things at play, but I think that's a good perspective
Yeah.
nonetheless. But now the talent pool is wider.
Mm-hmm.
But some of those people maybe never. You have to figure out, like, when you negotiate with them, there still has to be collaboration moments,
Mm-hmm.
and there should be someone that are in person. So some of my clients do a quarterly retreat. They pick a project one quarter, the team all, and they fly everybody
Okay.
in, and they have to be there for a week to collaborate on a project. So I think there's great things like that around how we build still collaboration in a virtual world, and some of that's still in person.
Yeah, and that idea of like the quarterly getting together, I think that for me the nice thing about that is, you know, it probably is exciting to be around everyone in person for those
Yeah,
moments, and that probably elevates the creative work and what you're doing because it kind of has that extra
yeah,
energy.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So
and I guess one of my worries is like I like that too. Like I love brainstorming and talking, and I did it last year online teaching last semester, and it was great, and I think the work was still great, but there's something about like kind of being in the room and feeling the energy
yeah,
that it just isn't the same. Like
yeah,
I just I don't know. And maybe it's
yeah,
just that I need to find new techniques, like you said, 45 minutes instead of 3 hours. Like,
yeah,
is there something else we could be doing? Or
exactly.
maybe we need all VR headsets and we need to look like we're next to someone and we would have
Yeah.
that same feeling.
Well, that's the other thing, like headsets. Some people like headsets. I cannot stand working with music. I'm just one of those people I can't work with music. Other people can. Like, you have to create a culture that works for you. My favorite story is I had a client once who was the owner of a firm, and everybody hated this owner. They're like, he's antisocial. He is always closing his door.
Did you
He,
find this by interviewing them when you
yeah,
got hired? Okay.
yeah. When I do a lot of staff assessments, like what's going on, what's the team feeling? Because if I only hear from the principal, everything's great, or everything's broken. I hear either of those things. And what I realized is he needed quiet time,
Okay.
right? And so what we decided to do is create office hours for him,
Hmm.
right? And he just didn't like the noise of the people. He needed quiet time. So we created office hours where he was always open. His door was always open. It had to be physically open. He had to be not doing anything other than being accessible to his team 2 hours every day at a fixed time. And the culture completely changed overnight. They started liking him. He was
Interesting.
more productive. And it was just simply because he shut his door. There was this physical barrier. And he did that only because he couldn't handle the noise and the chaos. And it wasn't like, I don't like you, team. I'm not available to you. It meant just like, I just need some space. Everybody's different. And you might be like, I thrive in, like, if there's a lot of people around me. Like, I love that,
Do you
even though
find
I work out of home.
when you yeah, and I do too. I actually I can remember being in studios and now, it's me and someone else if I'm working with someone. But I used to drive me crazy when someone had headphones on because I
Hmm.
like to every once in a while like shoot the shit. Like just really quickly like say
Exactly.
something like, "Oh my God, you have to see this." Like whatever it is. And I'd be like,
Yeah.
"Ah." And I'm like, it's me. I'm the one with the problem. Like that's how they like to work. But
Yes. And exactly. So
but
and you talked about this, you and I were talking about this before about modifying our behaviors for other people. Like,
mhm.
we sometimes have to change ourselves
Right.
in order to work better with them. They're not going to always change. So it's us that we have to change. Just like we do with our husbands and our spouses.
Right.
We have to sort of modify our behavior first. And we talked about that before we got on the podcast.
Do we
It's hard. It's hard to look for yourself and say, how do I change? Am I judging people in a way that is just not how they work?
right. But isn't it such an exciting just moment in time that I just feel like it's more okay to say that now? Like I
Yeah.
used to feel pressure that like I am who I am and there's a reason I'm like this and it's the right way to
Yeah.
be. And now I'm like, oh no, like I want to get better and I want to make, better decisions and figure out
Yeah.
what I could do because that I can control.
Exactly. Exactly. So I think this moment in time is really great. I think sometimes people are too sensitive. There's a little bit of that too. So I'm a little concerned about that moment in time right now, that we're a little overcompensating for everybody's issues. And some of
To
it,
me it'll balance. I feel like it was
yeah,
so far the other way, the pendulum moved this way and it it should come back down,
Exactly. That's a great way of
and
looking at it.
so part of me growing is trying to see the positive of things. And so I'm like, you know what? If it had to go to this extreme for a little bit, maybe that's a good thing and we can all
Yeah.
understand and then figure out the settling spot.
Yeah, I love that idea. I love that made me think, even just like, this is what I love about us,
I
right?
know.
All my clients, we learn from each
Yeah.
other. And that's a really good way of thinking about it, that there's this pendulum and that right now, because the world was so screwed up,
Yeah.
now we have to go back to like a nice middle ground. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, listening, caring about each other more is really important.
So I wanted to just ask this. You mentioned talking to the staff. Is there a barrier when you go in to get that trust from them? Like,
Yeah,
who wants to kind of give the dirt on their boss and not know
yeah,
who you're for? Like,
right.
are you a spy?
It's hard. I don't always, first of all, I always tell people this is not a bitch session. So I always say, I'm not here to have you bitch. I'm here to you telling me what the challenges are so I can fix them. And so I always tell people, let's not finger point,
Hmm.
right? As much as what is the situation, and I can figure out what the cause of the situation is, right? If they want to finger point, they can, but I try to stay away from that. I really do. But I can hear messages. Some people are very open and like, this guy is a mess, whatever, uh, or this woman, or whatever. Most people are not that honest. So I rather them just I want them to tell me what are the things that work in the studio and what are the challenges and what are the contributing factors to that challenge. And maybe one of them is people, but it could be a lot of other things. And but I also ask them to come with solutions too. So it's not a bitch session. Like,
I
what are
like that
some
last thing
things
you
that,
said, to come with solutions, because I think
yeah,
that can take away the bitch session part of it, because you
yeah,
start thinking about how to solve it instead of just kind of poisoning it by complaining and pointing
yeah,
fingers. Cool.
yeah. So that's what I try to do is say, like, if here's some problems, tell me how you would fix it if it was your company,
Ah,
right?
I love that.
So I always ask people that. My favorite question I always end with the interviews is like, if this was your company, what's the one thing you would change?
Huh.
What's the one thing you would stop? And what's the one thing you would continue?
I like
You know,
that.
and that really gives me ahas about and sometimes if I hear, oh, I wouldn't change anything, that means everything's pretty good. All we have to do is evolve.
Right.
And sometimes I'm like, oh, if you want to change, like if I hear change everything,
Then
then I'm like, everything's broken. The other thing is you have to decide there's going to be that one person that's just a negative person.
hmm. Do you always say
And so
get
you
rid of
have
that person, or is there ways of
no,
okay?
no, necessarily. I think for me, when I interview them, I have to identify who those people are
Hmm.
to make sure that I understand that there are more, they see the world through a negative lens.
Hmm.
And that's, I guess, okay. It's as long as it's not, if it's hurting the culture and if it's toxic to the culture, then that is a problem. But I just don't want people to be, I try to phrase questions like, tell me some positive stuff too. Even with the negative people, I really try to get them to think positively a little bit. Sometimes, yes, if there's somebody that's toxic to the culture because of that negativity, I will absolutely say, but I'm not a big person of like letting them go right away.
Yeah. Have you seen successes? Like, do you have success stories of someone that was kind of seeing the world through the negative lens and was really toxic, and that through working with them and with the company that you were able to,
Yeah.
not change them, but to get it to function and to kind of take away the part that was polluting the rest of the company?
I would say no. I don't have any. Like sometimes you can't
Wow.
change people. I don't
Yeah.
think I have. I wish I did have that great story. I do have stories of people changing. So
Hmm.
because a lot of times people do performance reviews terribly, right?
Yeah.
And so it's doing better performance reviews so you can get the best, so people will change overnight. There are people that change, but you're not telling them how to change. You're just like, oh, everything's great. But you're not telling them the truth, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I feel like we could do a whole conversation about performance reviews because there's, but we're not. I'm going to ask you one more question,
okay.
and it's very hard to put you on the spot. But I'm going to try.
Okay.
And I don't want this to be. I'm not digging for compliments. I
Okay.
don't want this. I want the brutally honest Emily.
Okay. You'll get her.
We collaborated.
Yeah.
And, I know that I have plenty of flaws.
Yeah.
Like, I like things to happen on my timeline. I have this problem in every part of my life, personal and work, that
Right.
like if something has to get done and I think of something, like I want it done yesterday.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't happen, I just do it myself. And, probably a little bit with some anger that like, why doesn't everyone else see the urgency that I see to get this done? And I'm an ideas person and I talk over people.
Yeah.
and I cut people off, and the podcast is helping with that a lot. I'm trying to work on that, but I want to hear from you.
Uh-huh.
Like, I want to get better. Like,
Yeah.
I want to improve. And so I want to hear from you from working with me.
Ooh.
What could I do to be a better collaborator?
Right. I actually think we did a pretty good job. And the reason why I think we did a pretty good job is we had very clear roles.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it'd be interesting to do it again because now for the role was, I had taught the class before, so I pretty much
Right. Had the curriculum.
yeah, and you were more like how this is how Tyler works. You're really good with the students, all this stuff about teaching strategies that I didn't know. So I think it actually worked. I also think we're similar people. Like all those things you just said about yourself are sort of like me. I like things fast. I'll do it myself. I sometimes talk over people, so I think I'm very similar to you. So I think that worked really well also. I would say the thing that, how, it's a good question.
It's funny because I'm trying to think about like what feedback I'd give you, and
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in the same moment of like,
What would you tell me? Yeah, I was going to say.
yeah, I know. I'm thinking about it.
I don't know. I think it worked well. That's why I'm honestly being honest with you. I would tell you if there was things, I would say maybe hearing your voice more. I wish we had
Mhm.
a little bit more of that debate that we talked about. We talked
Yeah.
about like that we have different perspectives. And even though I think I'm right, I do think I want to hear more of your voice. And I think the students would have benefited more from, I think a little bit was you were intimidated by my reputation and
Right,
my,
right. And this is, part of the time I was kind of soaking it all in. Like, I feel like I completely benefited more from that collaboration than you because I got to sit through your lectures and
yeah,
learn from you. And
yeah,
that was wonderful. I basically got your services and got paid to get them. So,
right. So I think, yeah, I think that would be the thing. I would think that hearing your voice more and having disagreements in front of the students is actually a great thing. Like,
hmm
because I think you would have been strong in your convictions and we could have battled it out in a way and the students could have seen there's different perspectives and neither are right or wrong.
which is so important because so many times students are like, well, so and so told me this is how you do it.
I hear that all the time.
I know. And I'm like, no, no, no. Like, that's how they do it.
Yeah.
And someone else does it another way, and that's okay.
Yeah,
So,
right. Pick what's good for you. So I think that's it. I
yeah.
would say that's the thing I would say is just having a stronger voice
hmm
and being more part of the,
You intimidate me, Emily.
yeah, I do that to a lot of people, unfortunately.
No, it's a good thing though. It gets me excited, and yeah, I hope that we can have those debates with the
Yeah.
students because there are difference of opinions of certain
Yeah.
pieces.
And I
Although,
love debates. Like that's like I always start when I take on a new client, when I collaborate with a new client, I always
there you
talk
go.
about that. Like if I'm saying something you disagree with, I have very strong opinions. I do that on purpose. If you don't agree, tell me. Like I want to battle it out. Like I love battles. I love that.
All right, let's finish with the one battle that I know we have.
Okay.
What's the first job a student should be looking
Oh
for?
God, that is a battle we always will have, Abby. Okay. So you've taught me a little bit too. So a lot actually.
No. Hold your ground. Come on.
Okay. So I believe that first job is very important and you should take your time in looking at it because I think it frames your portfolio. It frames your experience. Like if you take a job in-house at a company that has very strict brand guidelines, then your portfolio is going to reflect that. And it's going to be very hard to go and get another job elsewhere. I personally think people, they don't want to see student work after a few months when you're in the real world. And so your portfolio, you should take a job not for salary only, but for the level of experience you're going to get. So I tell people take their time thinking about that first job and that it shouldn't be an in-house job. I personally
That's
think
the part that, yeah.
I think unless you really only want to work in-house, once you get your first in-house job, it's very hard to move from in-house to a studio environment. Most studios don't want to hire somebody in-house who worked in-house because they have a different kind of experience. And so I usually tell people to work in a smaller studio so they can have more hands-on experience with clients. The challenge with that is that they get paid a whole lot less. And I
Right.
also, and this is one thing you taught me, is they have student debt. Like I'm a privileged white person. I forget about student debt. Like I paid my
Right.
kids' college education. They appreciate every moment of it. And I forget. And no, I haven't anymore, but I did when you taught me that. Like sometimes you have to take a job for money, and I get that.
Yeah, and for me, I look at the in-house thing being a little bit old school because when I graduated, in-house was definitely like way below
Yeah.
studio. It was like you were just not the same level of a designer. But then big tech, and all of the big companies, if you work in-house at Google, Facebook, Airbnb,
Yeah.
like, and get that on your resume, you can go other places and people respect that you worked in these big, even though they have no idea if you were like working on this one little widget that's only on like certain screens
Yeah.
of like you could be working on such a small thing. I think I also look at it as I try to help my students place them in positions where one day when they are in leadership positions, they can help forward the industry.
Hmm.
And
I
so
love that.
the idea that, student work gets old or that they see you only can do this one thing and they judge you. My hope is that the next generation of designers recognizes that's just how the world sometimes is, especially when
Yeah.
you're thinking about equity. Someone may have not had the money to go to the best school and they went to a community college
Yeah.
and they had to take this job, but they're really, really talented and smart. And so I try to kind of instill those values when they're young, and I don't want to get them to like poo poo, like, oh, it's not good enough, because then they might do that to someone in their future.
Yeah. I love that idea. I love that. I like the idea of the equity thing.
Yeah, and I also think that, not everyone is going to be that designer that you desired to be and you couldn't be,
Yeah.
like not everyone is that, but there's a place for you.
Yeah.
And so I don't want the disappointment.
Yeah.
I have some students that dream of working in these 2-3 person studios, and I have to burst their bubble and say, like, you're probably never going to work there. And that's fine. There's a place for you. And I don't want to have to manage the letdowns of
Yeah.
like so and so got the job where I wanted it and now my
Yeah.
career's over before it
Yeah.
started.
I guess I agree with some of that. I disagree with some of that. Like I agree with the idea of equity and that and all of that. What I disagree with is that it's an old school point of view because I'm not telling people not to work in a house because the work is less than. Because you're right. It's not less than.
It used to
It
be,
used to
yeah.
be less than. Now it's not. Now they're doing, yeah, now it's not. I get that. But what you're getting is a different kind of experience. There's usually the clients are different. So they're in-house clients.
Hmm.
There's usually people doing things like there's a production team, there's like a IT team. In studio environments, it's sort of like all hands on deck. And
Right.
so
You're
you have
sometimes
to,
answering the phone and whatever it
yeah.
might be.
So
Yes.
they're a little spoiled when they work in house, a little bit.
Hmm.
And so when they move from in house to agency or creative environment, it's a culture shock. And sometimes it works really well, but most
Right.
times for my clients, when they hire people like that, they don't always fit in because they're not that all hands on deck. They're like, I had people that did that for me, or I don't have that skill. That wasn't somebody else worked with. A lot of it's around client management. Usually in house, not everybody on the in house team works with clients. Whereas in studios, everybody works with clients. And so you have to have some client facing skills. So I think it's a balance, right? I think people should be more open to seeing that people have potential. It means taking on freelance work so you can expand your portfolio and show that you can prove it to other people that you do things.
Hmm.
But working also, the other thing that working in house is that they have salary expectations that are not what studios can afford. So I've lost candidates because they got offered jobs by Google or by the big tech for like twice of what my clients can offer.
Right.
And they take it because it's money, right? And I get that. But if you're solely driven by money, then you're going to limit your opportunities.
Right. And then on the other side, the in-house, you might go in-house though, and that could be your entire career, and that
Mm-hmm.
could be great.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the thing. Like
Yeah.
I don't know like percentage how much is in-house and how much is out, but I feel like the number of in-house designers has gone up dramatically in the
Oh,
past 10
yeah,
to 20
significantly.
years, like
Mm-hmm.
so much. And so there's a good chance your entire career is in-house at companies.
Yeah.
And so someone might not want to leave that environment. They might like it. They might
Yeah.
like the money
Oh,
and the perks
absolutely. Yeah.
and,
And they fit the culture. That's great.
right. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. If you really feel like you want to be in house and you're that kind of person, then go for it. Right.
Yeah. I worry about getting rid of the stigmatism about like it being bad. Like I think that's more of why it kind of gets me going with you
Yeah.
is like I don't want them to feel less than because they got that job.
I agree. I'm with you on that. The other thing I
No.
think we can agree on, tell me if we can disagree on this, but I'm
Okay.
curious about this. I do tell people don't work in house if you're the only person that's the creative.
Oh, I
Because
agree.
as a student, you're coming out of school, you really need to learn from other people. So that's the one thing I
Yes.
think we can agree on. If you're going to work
Yes.
in house right after school, be in an environment where you're going to learn and grow.
Yeah. And in like a decent sized creative team. Like
Yeah.
don't, one person and you, it
Doesn't work.
you're not gonna, because you for me, I've learned just as much, if not more, from my peers than from my
Exactly.
bosses.
Yeah. And the
So,
first 5 years of your career is most important. You're learning so much from other people.
hmm
And you need to be in an
yeah,
environment where you're constantly
yeah.
learning and
See, we
growing.
agree on that.
Yeah. So
There we
then
go.
we end on a positive note.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Emily. I love talking to you. So this is just like us catching up, but recording it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me come to this thing. It's great.
Sure.
I loved it.
And for anyone listening, if you want to learn more about Emily, you can buy her book now is available for ebooks, right?
Yeah, it's
Is that
out of print now. But yeah, so
okay?
it's still available by ebook.
It's a great book, and you can check all that out at emilycohen.com. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thanks for having me. Bye, Abby.
Thank you all so much for listening. If you are enjoying our show, please post us a review on whatever podcast streaming platform you use. To learn more about us, check out our website at designtogetherpod.com.